Welcome to the ACPE COVID-19 Town Hall event. The elected leaders of the association want to take a few minutes to share how the association is responding to the pandemic, what resources we're working to make available, and to explore some of your questions. Our panelists are as follows. Melissa Walker-Luckett from Children's Healthcare of Dallas, Texas, our ACPE board chair. Linda Wilkerson, recently retired from Parkland, also in Dallas, Texas, ACPE treasurer. Patrick McCoy, retired, formerly with Dartmouth Hitchcock in Vermont and New Hampshire. Sorry, he lives in Vermont and worked in New Hampshire. ACPE Foundation Board Chair. Cecilia Walker with Baptist Health System in Birmingham, Alabama, ACPE Certification Chair. Pam Laser, Cedar Sinai in Los Angeles, ACPE Accreditation Chair. Joanne Heaney-Hunter at St. John's, the ACPE Psychotherapy Commission Chair, and Catherine Higgins, the ACPE Director of Communities of Practice. Our moderator today is Sean Mai, who's now at Park Nicollet Hospital in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. He's also chair-elect of our ACPE board. If you have questions during the panelists' presentations, please submit them in the question box. You'll note in your control panel there's a place for questions. Please don't put them in the chat box. We might miss them there, but if you'll submit them to the question box. After a few opening comments and questions, we'll try to respond to as many as we can. Thank you for participating. If there are additional questions that need to be responded to, we'll try to put together an FAQ when this event is over. At this point, let me turn it over to Sean, and he'll begin the questions with our panelists.
Thank you, Trace, and I want to welcome all of you colleagues to this ACPE Town Hall meeting. As you know, these are unprecedented and very challenging times. So I think now more than ever, connection is important. And as I was touring the hospital this morning and a nurse and I were processing, she turned at the end and just said, you know, we get through this together. And that's what we're doing today. So thanks for being here. Thanks for joining in the conversation. And thanks to our panelists who I'm going to just take us through some time for each of them to introduce themselves and to speak to some aspects of our life as an organization. So I'm going to start with you, Melissa, and thanks for your leadership during this time. I'm sure you didn't plan on this type of thing happening while you were president, but just if you could speak to us today about any risks that might be there as an association as we go through these times.
Thank you. Well, certainly we've never faced anything like this before. These are a series of firsts for us. We've never had to cancel a national meeting in the past. We've also never had to cancel things like communities of practice or other sorts of gatherings that were planned for members. So it comes right in the midst when those of us who are in hospital know that our staffs are very stressed, and I'm sure that our psychotherapist colleagues also find people being very stressed, and so it's just hard all the way around. You ask about any risks to us. I think I want to say I don't believe that we are at risk as an association, because we do well with supporting one another. We do well with calling each other and finding out how we're doing, what's going on. There's some things in the works for us that have been proving themselves to be successful. And most importantly, I don't think there's a risk to us, because this is an unprecedented time for our generation. And it is a time when we and what we do and what we train others to do, we chaplains, spiritual care providers, and our psychotherapist providers, people need us more now than ever before. This morning in Morning Report, my director talked about having gone up on the floor yesterday. We have actually had a lot of concern about COVID, and families are in quarantine or in isolation, and the staff are concerned and the families are concerned. And he went up and visited some of those folks, and the staff expressed relief and gratitude and
here. Thanks for joining in the conversation.
There were people here, the chaplains and the other providers, to be there for them as well. And the families are grateful for the presence of people like us, at least here in my hospital. And so it makes it worth coming to work and being here, even in a altered sort of way at times. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, and I just am thinking too about, you know, we have our life together as educators, and like you and I and some of us that have been in conversation with other associations, APC and ACC and AJC. I'm wondering if you have a sense for, has all of this changed those conversations? I think, you know, I think now more than ever, I'm appreciating our connection with those folks.
I think that our connection with our other colleagues, that connection and our commitments are the same. We remain committed to each other and to doing our work together. There are some things that have slowed the process down. We were to have met on this past Sunday with our NAJC colleagues sponsoring us or hosting us in New Jersey. And of course, that could not happen. And so we are going to be continuing conversations on Zoom and having our faces on board as we talk together and we speak in spirit, even through the distance. So it's always good to be together. We are face-to-face people, right? And I am learning. I will say I am learning how to appreciate. It's not really virtual, but internet connection. I was skeptical for a long, long time, and I found myself being incredibly surprised and grateful for some of the online conversations that I've been a part of the last few days.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, I remember when the first CPE student I had told me about doing a pastoral care class online years ago. And I just thought, how do you do a pastoral care class online? So I'm learning too about how you can effectively use technology. So, and speaking of looking at faces on the screen here, Linda, I'm looking at you, and I'm just always appreciating the time that I've been on the board, how well you do with our finances and just your gifts as a record keeper. And I'm wondering, with units ending early and the unknowns of the summer units, how do we kind of navigate these waters financially?
Well, thank you, Sean, for asking. You know, the first thing I want to say is how grateful I am to each of you who have joined us for the ministry that you're providing, for the sustenance that you are providing, for the way that you are working with students to help them be less anxious during a really, really anxious time. I retired in June of 2019, so I'm not in the hospital setting now, just a little bit. And I know how stressful that can be. So I really am grateful to each one of you for your ministry and all that you're doing. In terms of our finances, right now we're in good shape. Our expenses are down, thank goodness, because we can't do a lot of the things the way we normally would. We're not paying for accreditation site visits. We're not paying for COPCs to gather. We're not paying for people to travel to committees or commissions. And those are some of the regular expenses that can really be the most variable for our organization. We're still paying staff, of course, and of course, they're still working for us, even though they're working from home. We're still receiving income from senders and members. So keep those cards and letters coming. We don't know what kind of impact the changes to the summer will be, but we're going to be watching that closely. You know, we do generate a pretty good amount of income from our summer units, and so it may impact our budget, but we're going to make the changes necessary to keep our budget balanced and our programs funded, and I think we're going to be okay. And in a little bit, we're going to hear from Patrick, so he'll tell us a little bit about how the foundation is doing, and that'll certainly be a resource to us if we were to find ourselves in serious trouble. But I don't think we will. I think we're going to be able to manage.
Yeah, and I see Patrick there, and I feel a lot of gratitude for the work that the foundation has done the last several years in really building a strong sort of undergirding of the organization with the foundation. And Patrick, I know my own investment stuff has taken a huge hit in the stock market, and I would imagine our foundation has as well. And just wondering if you could speak to how we've fared thus far, and if you want to say anything about the work of the foundation right now.
Sure, Sean. Thanks for the question. It's going to come as a surprise to no one attending this conference that the ACPE's investment funds have experienced the same kind of declines that the market has generally. People are using the word unprecedented with kind of an unprecedented level of repetition, I think, but certainly the decline in the value of our stock invested funds has gone down, and I don't think there's any reason to believe that we've necessarily reached the bottom of that right now. We were at an all-time high, along with the rest of the market, at the end of January, which had built up our endowment fund to $6 million or a little bit better. And we've suffered in the intervening time at least a 20% decline, but we're bouncing up and down along with the rest of the market. So the good news is that our foundation treasurer, Tom White, is a financial advisor by profession and has been really solid in leading the planning of the foundation in terms of safeguarding the prudential aspect of our fund management. So although our capital investments have gone down significantly in value, we've been holding a reserve of $500,000 in cash just against this kind of potential, because we saw over the last couple of years, not anticipating anything like this, but seeing a lot of volatility in the market anyway. And our planning for that, with Tom's guidance, was to assure that we had a good solid cash position that's not affected by this by the market. So sort of building on Linda's remarks a couple of minutes ago, I think that for the near term, over the next year or so, that we are well positioned from the point of view of the foundation to provide ACPE with the assets that it may need to weather this storm. I think the other piece is that just recognize that investment in equity markets is a long-term game, which suits us in ACPE because we're in a long-term game. Mm-hmm. And I think that we can expect that it will take a good long while for our fund balances to rebound or work their way back up to anything like what they were recently. But we still have a solid, healthy investment portfolio. The stocks and other investments that we hold are designed to be high quality, so that they have every prospect of weathering this storm as well, and that we will be there with them to benefit from them in the future. So both in the near term and the long term, I think the foundation is in a good spot.
Thank you.
To help ACPE achieve its goals in the long term.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm grateful for, and I'm not sure that there's this wide sense for the board that you have for the foundation. Is just a strong, really strong board, and with your leadership, I'm just appreciating what we have in you and in the board that you lead. So thanks for your expertise as we navigate, as you say, these unprecedented times. So
yeah, thank you,
thanks,
Sean.
Patrick. Yeah, and as an organization, we are about, as we often say, certifying educators and accrediting centers. And Cecilia, thank you for your work with the commission, the work that you've done and the work that you will be doing. And I'm wondering, as we've gone through this last couple of months, how is the Certification Commission responding to the challenges that we're facing, and maybe even specifically, if you could speak to what CECs and their educators might need to know right now.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, as all of this began, the commission met and decided that we would offer consultations for those who were seeking to become certified educators. They'll do it via Zoom. And so speaking with Sheila on yesterday, we've gotten a docket together in May, June, and July for them to meet their committees by Zoom. For those who were going up for associate, we have given them the opportunity to use the same materials that they had and to be able to present in our fall meeting and meet face to face for their committee. So they don't have to rewrite materials because so much is going on already, and they were getting their materials ready to send up for our meeting in May when it was canceled. So we understand that this is a crazy time, and so we want to be respectful and sensitive to what everybody is going through, but to help them to understand that we'll get through it together.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's just helpful to hear, both personally and also for the membership to be able to have that update. And accreditation is also an important part of what we do. And Pam, you and the commission have been doing a lot of work this year as we have shifted to a new accreditation process. And so wondering, one of the things that your folks have an especially good finger of the pulse on is the Department of Education, and wondering what you're hearing from the DOE, and just speak to what's going on with the Accreditation Commission right now with some of these challenges.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, it has definitely been quite a year for accreditation. The Accreditation Commission has been meeting weekly to discuss the changing landscape that we're all aware of. And to help centers remain in compliance with the standards, the Commission has made several strategic decisions for this emergency time. Firstly, one of the first things we did was that the portfolio materials due date, which was March 31st, yesterday, we moved to May 1st. And so that is to give centers more time to be able to complete their portfolios when we know that so many of our educators are just overwhelmed with the amount of work that they're having to do right now. The Commission has also authorized a temporary change to the number of hours that are required for a half unit of CPE. If you will recall, a half unit of CPE has always been 240 hours. and we have reduced that temporarily to 200 hours. We're hoping that this change will allow centers and students who are impacted by the new restrictions to be able to earn a half unit of credit at this point. And this change is good through the end of December of this year. And our hope is that centers will be able to provide students with the other half unit of credit before the end of the year. We're also temporarily allowing students to complete their clinical hours via placement sites outside of the CPE center, such as, for example, congregations, long-term care, nursing homes, and so on. And we're allowing this without the usual need for a clinical placement agreement to have been signed prior to the start of the unit, because we realize this is an emergency and students need to complete their hours as much as possible. And so we're asking that rather than having a clinical placement agreement signed prior to the start of the unit, if students are able to flex and turn their clinical hours to another site, that the educator in the center just get a clinical placement agreement in place as soon as possible. We've also changed our 3-year peer consultations for centers that were going to be happening this year. All centers who would have been in the equivalent of year 3 this year, those peer consultations are not going to be happening unless a center specifically requests it. And we're hoping this will give educators more time to focus on the day-to-day needs of their centers right now. The Commission has also delayed all site visits until after June 15th. So any centers that were supposed to be having a site visit before June 15th, those site visits are going to be delayed. And we realize that even June 15th is a moving target, and we may have to take a look at this again. At the moment, we're reaching out to all the centers that have scheduled site visits between June 15th and August 1st as well, to be able to ascertain each center's individual situation.
And Pam, so it sounds like that you guys are doing, or ACPE is doing all that we can do within the framework of what we're given with the Department of Education. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Sean. We've been in regular contact with the Department of Education, and the biggest change that they're allowing us to implement this year is that much of our 6-year site visits, what we used to call our 10-year visits, our 6-year site visits will be, most of those visits will be, or much of those visits will be done via Zoom. The Department of Education still does require an in-person site visit for these 6-year reviews, but we're hoping that if we can do as much as possible via Zoom, we'll be able to send a smaller team, and the visit will be shorter and therefore easier for the center and for the teams. This in-person visit will simply be to affirm what the review team has learned from the portfolio and from the Zoom meetings that they will be having. And we will continue to work with our centers in scheduling site visits so that we can remain compliant with the DOE requirements, while at the same time being as sensitive as we possibly can to the needs of individual centers and our educators during this time.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm just, it blows me away sometimes, just the volume of work that gets done with the organization. And I know you guys spend a lot of hours attending to accreditation issues. So thank you, and thanks to the Commission for the good work that you're doing. So I am also, Joanne, as I look at your picture on the screen here, I'm grateful for our growing organization, and that certainly includes the psychotherapists and pastoral counselors that are part of our organization, and wondering if you might speak to the specific challenges that you're all facing during this time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean, and thanks to everyone for taking this time together to talk about this important topic. I think the biggest issue for us as psychotherapists has been face-to-face meeting with clients. I'm a faculty member at a university, and I know that shifting all of my classes to online has been challenging, and shifting clients to online can be a really difficult situation for some folks. And I know people are taking different approaches to this. Some use Zoom or another video conferencing platform, and some others are trying to find creative ways to meet in shared spaces with appropriate distancing. People are doing different things. The work is continuing. And I really hope that for some people, this dilemma, this tragedy that we're facing may open up some new opportunities to serve people who otherwise can't get to an office space. I know for myself, I resisted distance sessions as well. I just felt that you couldn't possibly do things as well online as you could face to face. But what I'm discovering is that there are many ways to work effectively with video conferencing, and that the good work that we can do can actually be extended to folks that might not otherwise be able to see us. And that's really a good thing.
Yeah, and I think about what all of this tragedy means for mental health across the country, and so I'm wondering, as you do this important work, you know, how can ACPE maybe be helpful or be a resource right now?
Well, we actually were talking about this just this morning, and maybe considering ways that ACPE can help counselors and other therapists come together with people that are seeking help. I think everything we know and everything we're hearing says that there will be a long-term recovery from this. And I think that our spiritually integrated psychotherapists and counselors can be resources, both professionally and personally, to not only clients, but to certified educators and spiritual care practitioners. In case you can't tell from my accent, I am a New Yorker, and I'm in the middle of so much of what's going on. I hear stories on the news every day. My daughter is a clinical social worker in a hospital, and we know that people are suffering terribly. And the professionals, medical professionals and spiritual care professionals are feeling the stress. So, for example, there are retired members of the former AAPC and some active members as well who are volunteering. We signed up on a registry for in New York State to reach out and to provide short-term assistance to not only clients that are suffering, but to pastoral caregivers and to medical professionals that are in the midst of so much stress these days. And so if we can provide some psychotherapy, some spiritual care, not only to patients, but to staff and pastoral care staff as well, I think we would be making a great contribution. Someone has to care for the caregivers. And our members, the members of the psychotherapists that moved from APC to ACPE are ready and willing and uniquely equipped for that kind of work.
Joanne, I appreciate that so much, and I didn't realize that you were in New York, and I certainly have been thinking about you and colleagues that are in New York City, and so we're all feeling it, and I think you guys are feeling it in some very very real and intense ways. So yeah, thinking about you, and thanks for what you're doing to I think this is how we integrate you know, the organization. So with that kind of love and that kind of help. So thank you,
Thanks,
Joanne.
Sean. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And Catherine, I just have appreciated the work that you've been doing in the last weeks with professional well-being and trying to make sure that our members are supported at this time. And it's, you know, having gotten on some of the calls that you've done, that's been powerful. And that you're, you know, providing that kind of support and professional well-being is huge. And so I appreciate that. And just wondering if you could speak to some of the work that you and the committee are working on.
Sure, Sean. We have been focusing our efforts really in two directions. One, you all may have seen the resource page on acpe.edu. I am currently gathering resources. These resources have included original content from our members, resources from our communities of practice. There have been spiritual care resources, as well as from our psychotherapist members. So really a variety of things. If you have things that you'd like to see up there, please feel free to send them my way. We will be continuing to refine those and organize those as the days go on. And we've also been doing some virtual drop-ins for our educators. We've had 5 of them so far, and up to about 98 people, I think, who have just dropped in, hungry for connection, for learning what our colleagues are doing, for ways that they're facing some very significant challenges within the institutions. So we'll continue to do those as long as they're helpful, and look for ways to maybe to bring in psychotherapists to those as well. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And like I said, I've been touched by gathering with colleagues in that way, and in ways that we wouldn't have otherwise, which I think is a gift. I wanted to, and just to note that we'll keep making sure those opportunities are posted on the front page of the website, so people don't have to go looking for how to do that or where to go, that sort of thing. So Catherine, thank you so much. I appreciate your work. And I just wanted to take a moment before we go to questions to see if there was anything else, Melissa or any of the other panelists that you wanted to add. I kind of took us through each one of you, but wanted to just pause. And is there anything that you would like to add to what you have been sharing? All right. Well, if not, I'm going to go ahead and see if there are some questions there's Melissa again. I'm going to go ahead and see if there are some questions that folks have. If we can make technology. Okay. So Pam, this one's for you. So for a lot of places, placement agreements for telechaplaincy are tough in this environment, and wondering what are options for educators related to placement agreements and telechaplaincy. Does that make sense?
I hope so. So I would say that, you know, from the centers that I'm hearing right now, almost every center I know has gone to telechaplaincy in some form. And you know, if you're doing telechaplaincy within your own organization, then you don't need a clinical placement for that. But if you are doing telechaplaincy outside of your organization, for instance, in a congregation, or as I said, long-term care, and we've had centers that are also reaching out to, for instance, fire departments, first responders, people like that as well. So if you are doing that, I would highly recommend consulting with your own center's legal and risk management just to find out what they would want, and also suggest the same thing to the organization that you're reaching out to. Given that this is an emergency time, I think that we certainly want to make this as possible as possible for everyone. But at the same time, it is helpful to not put our organizations and our students at risk if, in ways that we might not have anticipated.
That's really helpful. I mean, just to give some concrete examples of when you might need to attend to a placement agreement. Some residents and interns are being, I know, redeployed to serve in a variety of support roles, and I just wanted to check in. Those hours still count, don't they?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. And maybe there was another question, and since I have you on the line here, wondering, is ACPE loosening the 21-day timeline for student evaluations to be written?
Well, so we have heard from some centers, obviously right now is a really hard time to get final evaluations written. So we haven't loosened anything, because at the moment, the way it is written in our in the accreditation manual is that if an educator needs more than 21 days to get their evaluation to the student, they need to negotiate with the student and then simply reach out to the assigned commissioner for their center and let the assigned commissioner know that they're going to be taking longer than the 25 days. The maximum allowed is 45 days. So they would need to just let the assigned commissioner know when they're going to be able to get them. So, if you need an extra 2 weeks, just let the assigned commissioner know. I think I'm repeating myself here, but that you've worked with your student and this is the agreed upon date and it's within 45 days.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. And that kind of brings to mind, or another question that somebody had was, Cecilia, this is for you and certification. Do you see any anticipated delays for CECs in the process, or addressing delays?
Delays, not really following what delays how.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly, I'm trying to interpret this question, but delays in their processes.
I mean, with everything that's going on, it's highly possible that they won't have the time to be working on papers and doing the writing and everything. But if they're, and the rest of us who would be sitting on the Zoom calls might not have time to be able to do that. So I could see some adjustment maybe happening in that. But I really don't know. I think it'll be on a case-by-case basis. Depending on what they're able to continue to write and prepare, that as soon as we get to the other side of this, that those people who are sitting on their team zone for their Zoom meetings, for them moving from one phase to the next, will make themselves as available as possible. But
Yeah.
there's so many layers, like if they're writing their theory integration projects and working on those things, then their person who's working with them, it depends also on what all is going on. And so I could see some delays happening, but I think we can make that time up.
Okay, and one of the things that you did address, and wondering if you could just repeat that, because I think it's an important piece, and that is meeting for associate, and and you referenced that, and there were a couple of questions related to that, if you wouldn't mind sort of readdressing meeting for associate.
Okay, so we had, I think, 12 people who were going to meet, who had declared their intent to meet in May. And all of those people have been rolled over to meet in November at our fall meeting, our fall leadership meeting. Those who had already declared intent will just submit the paperwork that they were going to submit for May. And if they were there were a couple who were at the very end of their time, and they were, so we've given them an automatic extension. So nobody will have to worry about at the end of my time and I can't meet committee. All of those extensions are in place so that they can still meet and have the opportunity to meet the commission in November.
That's helpful. That's helpful. Thank you. Melissa, I'm going to direct this to you. And I know you and I have talked about or heard about some creative ways that people are dealing with what the pandemic has caused in terms of programs and those sorts of things, and wondering if you have any creative options that, as you talk to members, that any creative options that you're hearing about or that might be helpful to share. Melissa, are you there? All right, I think I lost Melissa. So Catherine, I have a question here about, you talked about peer reviews for, you spoke a little bit about peer reviews. What's happening exactly with peer reviews this year, if you would mind speaking to that a little bit more?
So far, nothing has changed to the peer review process. We have had some folks requesting extensions. That those will certainly be evaluated kind of as usual. If you have one coming up and you think that you might not be able to get it done, please stay in communication with us. You can email peerreview@acpe.edu. But so far there has been no change to the process as it's currently laid out.
Okay. So I think we may have Melissa back on the line. Just let me check in. Melissa, are you back on the line?
Yes, I am. I'm unmuted by myself and I'm unmuted by the organizer. So we're all on the same page now. So I have heard of people being very resourceful. Here in our center, I will tell you what we've done. We have started some telechaplaining. We have, our hospital has given everyone, has put on in front of the doors, the red box, that if you are going to see a patient or knock on the door and need to go in just a bit to ask someone to come out to speak with the chaplain, or to say the chaplain's here to speak with them, we have a red box that we can stand in without using important and scarce resources of PPE. So we stand in the red box if we can and talk to people if they're unwilling to come out, but we certainly walk inside the red box and invite them out as we can. The other thing that we've done here in our staff is we have split the staff into 2 teams, and we overlap on Wednesdays. A team works Sunday through Wednesday. Wednesday through Saturday is B team. And we're having all of our CPE curriculum on Wednesday, all via Zoom. So staff chaplains are filling in on Wednesday, and otherwise our residents are available in this team sort of effort. And it's, it just feels creative and a little strange not to go to work on Monday morning, but it makes me still mindful of work, and I still do things about work. But it's a way for us to stretch our resources in terms of personnel, because our interns can't do some of the visits that they need to do, and so we're using them on the telephone. The other thing that I would say is one of my colleagues I was talking to last night is doing with placement agreements, placements for her chaplain to finish their extended program via tele-chaplaincy. I would say that I would imagine that the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab has online the webinar that they did last week or the week before about tele-chaplaincy. So I think we could all benefit from that. And Catherine has as she mentioned, she has a resource page on our website. And I really have been, I missed one last night, but the one that I was able to get to the week before of a drop-in virtual meeting was really very meaningful and intimate and caring. So I hope that we will continue to find ways to support each other in those things. So go to the resource page and see what's there as well.
Yeah, I would echo the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab, and what they've been offering in terms of webinars has been really, really good stuff. And that's where, as we've talked about and moved toward relating more closely with entities in the spiritual care world, Chaplaincy Innovation Lab is a great example of a great partnership. So, and I know Trace has really done a lot to facilitate that connection. So Pam, I'm going to go back to you. There's always so many people that have accreditation questions, but so can you talk a little bit more about the half unit piece, going from 240 hours to 200 hours? And can you talk a little bit about just give a little background of that, and how might centers creatively work with with that time where there may be a little short. I don't know if that makes sense, but can you speak a little bit more to the half unit piece?
Sure. So here I'm also racking my brain, hoping I can remember all the things we've done.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. I have to look up a lot of stuff these days. So, a full unit of CPE is 400 hours, and usually a half unit of CPE is 240 hours. And so what we decided to do is, because we can't reduce the number of hours for a full unit, which is 400 hours, we are able to flex with the, during this emergency time, we are able to flex with the half unit. And what we are hoping with that is to not penalize students who can only finish a half unit at this point. So if students have 200 hours, they will be able to get that half unit instead of having to get 240 hours and then maybe come back and do another 240 hours. So that was the thinking behind it, was to try and help students be able to get the hours that they need. And so they would still need to do 125 clinical hours. And I'm trying to remember was the oh dear. See, I can't look up. I've got too many screens open here and I'm not able to look up. So maybe, okay, so 75. They can do up to 75 educational hours. Thank you. That was a rescue from Mark Medwed over there. So anyway, but the overall goal was, as I said, to be able to help students be able to get the 400 hours they need without being penalized for having to stop halfway through.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I'll see if I can come up with another like zinger and see if I can get you.
It's not hard these days.
Thank you. Cecilia, I was wondering, I know we're using Zoom a lot, and wondering, do you have any sense for how that scheduling process is going, and if there are delays, and what do you do about those delays? Can you speak to that at all, in regards to, yeah, the use of Zoom?
Are you talking about for their committees for the
Yep.
different phases and things?
Yeah.
I know that Sheila is on top of when people request that, and then she's, working to make that available. I have not heard any complaints about anything being delayed that somebody is requesting right now. So I'm not aware if there has been any delay yet.
Okay.
Really, probably because none would be scheduled right on top of the annual conference, because we would have all been there. But if there was something that was canceled or delayed, I don't know about it.
Okay. Okay. Well, and that says something in and of itself, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm just aware of time, and Trace, I'm going to send it back to you, and for some closing comments, and want to thank the panelists for being open to questions and doing a nice job of fielding those. So thank you very much. And Trace, back to you.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you for moderating. Thanks to the panelists for making time and joining us today. Couple of other comments. Many of you have seen with our partners, we put out a request for volunteers because we're already getting requests from centers, particularly in the Northeast and New York City more than anywhere else, that are just overwhelmed and don't have the capacity. They've got staff that are now sick, and they're looking for help in providing spiritual care. Some of that just for staff because of the number of staff members who are also sick and not able to serve communities and families. I am delighted to tell you that within the first 48 hours, we've gotten almost 1,000 people who have filled out those forms.
Wow.
If you need a little glimpse of hope for where we are in the world right now, it is unbelievable. And the vast majority of them are BCC folks, certified educators, CECs, CPE students. It's our crowd, it's our people. They are showing up in a time of need, and I'm just so delighted by that piece. The other really wonderful piece are how many psychotherapists and licensed counselors have also signed up and offered to provide care for the people who are providing care. So precisely the kinds of things that you heard Joanne talking about earlier, we've got folks that are willing to volunteer their time to do that. As we've said many times, we don't know how to do this. We're going to make this way by walking it together. So it's great to see so many people show up and do that, and we'll work hard to manage those volunteers well. There's some questions and some challenges around things like placement agreements for volunteers for telechaplaincy. Please know that we'll do everything we can to work with you to try to make these processes as seamless as we can. Please know as well, we're probably going to make some mistakes, so we'll do our best, but it is very much in a response mode in our places right now. Staff are all doing this from home offices, so we're doing our best to stay in touch with each other to keep on top of things. But the piece that I think we hope you hear very clearly is that the volunteer leadership is doing their very best to stay on top of it. We as staff are doing what we can to stay on top of things. I want to say just a personal thanks to the amount of time and energy that staff are giving. They've just been tremendous. Being able to get into the office is next to impossible now for Atlanta. But at the same time, folks have really worked hard to make this work. So we had just over 200 people who showed up this afternoon for this webinar. As need develops, we will continue to try to put the word out and make sure that we keep you informed. We know that we're going to have a conversation around some budget things once we know what the implications of the summer are and how many people are going to be able to run summer units, who's going to have to get creative in the way they run summer units. But that's the busiest time of the year for our association in terms of overall units that are being offered. So We figure it out together, and we don't have an answer at this stage. So we don't want to run and be hasty about it because we still don't know quite what the trajectory for this disease is. It doesn't look good, and it may be a second wave that we're looking at in the fall too. So we'll begin developing contingency plans around that as well. In the meantime, we've recorded this so it's available to you. I think we got to all the questions that were posted. We are grateful for all of you and for what you're doing out there in the field. Know that we're thinking of you, and if we can be supportive in any way, please send emails along the way. Thank you so much. Y'all be well, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. Thanks again to the panelists.